Welcome to episode 2 of the Solaris project. I'm Maxwell Davila, the executive director of Solaris ATX, and today we're here to interview Miss Eileen McGinnis, the founder of the Parents Climate Community. And here's the rest of our team that'll be interviewing her as well.
Hi, I'm Audrey Huang, and I am the Director of Marketing.
Hi, I'm Tyler Schulenberg, and I'm the Director of Learning and Development.
Hi, I'm Pedro Alvarez Gutierrez, and I'm the Director of Education.
One of our members is having a technical difficulty and cannot unmute, but her name is Aratrika, and she is our Director of Communications.
And now we're going to move forward with asking our first question. So, Miss McGinnis, we're super excited to meet with you today. And our first thing we want to talk about is to introduce the Parents Climate Community. What does it do, and what kind of impact is it making in Austin?
Very cool. First off, thanks so much for having me. It's been lovely to connect with you, and I have a lot of admiration for what you all have gotten off the ground in a really short time. So the Parents Climate Community is a local 501c3 nonprofit, kind of born and raised in Austin, Texas. We started in 2019. Just as a meetup group, like a monthly meetup group for parents and families to make some space to talk about climate and how to take action. And then over time, I just got sucked in. This became more and more like my passion. And so now we're a nonprofit working with lots of partners all over Austin on connecting families and parents to really like easy, doable, but still meaningful ways to take action on climate change. We are also doing some work supporting around mental health and climate. So we have climate cafes for parents so that they can have a space to talk about their feelings in order to be supportive of the kids in their lives. We also do some ecotherapy that's more like intergenerational. So yeah, really just like want to be a one-stop shop for families looking to take action on climate in the Austin area.
Great, that's so amazing. I think that's a really cool project. I can see, how that can definitely help a lot of parents. I know, parenthood's really stressful. I mean, I think, as kids, I think we know how much stress our parents go through, dealing with us. So I totally get it.
Yeah.
I think that's some great.
Yeah, and I think, yeah,
Um,
just to add to that too, Max, I think that like in terms of impact, I think that one thing that's really motivating to me is yeah, definitely wanting to make it approachable, not wanting it to be like yet another thing on parents' to-do lists, but something that's also like fun that they can do with their kids that but also that even though I'm like super again in awe and admire youth activism and youth leadership in this space, like that is absolutely needed, and youth are really driving the charge when it comes to environmental change. But I also think, yeah, the impact is that it's like important for us to be talking across generations. Young people should feel like they can talk to their parents about this, and that their parents are also and grandparents are also playing a role to make change.
I definitely agree with that. We wanted to also want to ask, about your journey. Like, how'd you, get into the climate industry? I feel like that it's like a little bit off the beaten path. I think not, it's not something everyone coming out of college is like, oh, I want to go into activism. So yeah, how was your journey? How'd you get there?
Yeah, yeah, and mine is definitely not like a typical journey. So I've never taken like environmental science. I was not a like environmental policy major or anything. I was an English major in college. And I came here to UT Austin to get my PhD in English. So I started out teaching, I was teaching writing and literature classes at St. Edward's for many years. This was totally not my skill set or not my path. But so for me, it really was as a mom of a really young kid, I just started tuning in to sort of how urgent this issue was, and just got to a point where I felt like I need to do more. And I remember like specifically my son was like about 3 at the time, and I was thinking, okay, what if my son is now 13 and he turns to me and says, Mom, like, how did you know that this was happening and not do anything about it? And so that was like a moment of like imagining, like, I knew I had to act, and that part of what it meant to be a parent, right? Like in this time, part of my responsibility, along with like making the dentist appointment and and making sure he gets his homework done, is trying to do what part I can to take action toward this issue that threatens his future and his health. So yeah, so that was my very like unconventional path. But I think once I found that path, there's just so many great people and so much good energy that's like kind of helped me keep going. So yeah, really, really lucky that I stumbled into this work.
Definitely. That sounds amazing. I definitely see that's pretty, unconventional. I guess, I think they always say, parenthood opens your eyes to a lot of stuff because it's really a new, experience. So I can definitely see how that inspired you.
Yeah, I love that, Max. I think that's right on. I feel like yeah, there's been nothing more transformative in my life than becoming a new mom, and it really helps to see like what matters, right? And also to help you kind of connect beyond yourself to the larger, to like for like the first time I was really thinking about like what's my legacy going to be? Like, how can I be a good ancestor? Like those questions that I hadn't really been thinking about, to be honest, before then, really became front and center.
I think Audrey had a question, so go ahead.
Yeah, I think that it's so cool that you've created this like really, it sounds like tight-knit, very impactful community. So I was wondering, is there something specifically that you are like most proud of or like the biggest impact that you think you've had through the Parents Climate community?
Well, yeah, I think thanks so much for those kind words, Audrey. I think first off, just creating this space feels awesome. Like we are offering something really unique in Austin, in creating this kind of intergenerational space and like coming at this issue from an approach of like fun and like intergenerational connection. I mean, actually, one of the I think biggest wins for us has to do with clean energy advocacy at the local level. So. Last fall, Austin Energy was proposing some new gas peaker plants in East Austin. And we got together with a bunch of coalition partners to advocate that they reconsider that and invest instead in like solar storage, solar and battery storage. And it was just a really amazing, like when we were successful. The city right now is looking, into some bids for battery storage. And so what I thought was so cool about it though is just like being a part of a bigger picture, being part of a coalition. But I was also really proud of how we did it. So we used climate art and like community art making. We worked with our director of community art, Stephanie Chavez Noel, to create this like 10-foot tall sun puppet that the community made piece by piece, people of all ages over months. And we took that puppet to City Hall. We used that art making to try to sort of educate people about the issues and kind of understand the advocacy ask along the way. And so, yeah, I'm really proud of the win, but I'm also proud about how we did it, that we did it in a way that kind of was creative and arts based and kind of opened people's imaginations.
Yeah, sorry, I have a question. So your website talks about the critical mass campaign that y'all did in April. And how did you guys think about bringing this idea to Austin, and how has it helped the Austin your organization grow more and involve more parents?
Thanks for asking about that. That's definitely another one I feel proud of. It's just not as like connected to clean energy, the clean energy world, but so I just got inspired. I'm always kind of inspired about what people are doing in other places, and there are hundreds of these critical mass rides happening like all over the U.S., Canada, Europe. So just to step back, like what critical mass is. If people know about critical mass, this is sort of a movement that maybe started back in the 90s. And it was a little bit of like a contentious guerrilla movement to get people to sort of make space for bikes on city streets and to say, like, we need to share the road. So critical mass is sort of like a kid and family friendly version of that, but the goals are really the same. The goals are to say, wait a minute, like, streets don't have to just be for cars. Like streets are everybody's, and like young people and non-drivers like should also have a right to share the streets with cars. So that was like the advocacy message. In terms of like the impact, I mean, we connected with so many folks. We had our U.S. Congressman Lloyd Doggett speak and also like ride along with us, which was super cool. So yeah, I think it just brought some really good visibility and awareness. We had over 200 folks join the ride of all ages. And we're sort of trying to figure out what comes next from that. We're definitely going to do critical mass again next spring because people really loved it. But I think we're also interested in like how can we help people make habit shifts between those events, like not just once a year, but like maybe once a week. So we've been trying to talk to some schools about starting bike buses, so commuting to school by bus instead of by car. So yeah, still sort of figuring out what's next with that, but we definitely want to build more community around like advocating for bike infrastructure, making sure not just like single adult riders, but that families can feel comfortable riding and getting around by bike.
That's really awesome, especially how you're really connecting with the community. And I wanted to specifically ask about what role parents can play in the climate activism area. Specifically, like what have you learned about dealing with parents, and how does your job work, especially dealing with how parents might not be as informed as many other people about the entire climate activism area?
Yeah, and I want to start there too because I mean, some refrain that I hear that really bugs me in particular is sort of like, oh, my kid would be interested, or my teenager would be interested in that. Like, oh, that's sort of this expectation of like, oh, y'all will solve it, you'll solve this problem, you'll fix this. So definitely we want to, educate parents about kind of the urgency of the issue and how it's impacting kids and young people right now, not in some like future. And we can't wait. We don't have time to wait for y'all to grow up and make better decisions than us. But yeah, I think that parents, the reason why I wanted to engage parents is because I do think we have something unique to bring to the conversation. And the truth is that a lot of parents have been missing from the environmental organizing space because of time, like y'all mentioned earlier, right? Like it's hard to find the time. Parents are busy, they have a lot of different obligations. So yeah, I think one thing that in working with parents, we have to make it easy. We have to make it like on the weekend or something that you can bring your kids to or kind of engage alongside your kids. So we definitely found that that's a good format to get people involved. But yeah, I'm right with you, Pedro, that like education is also like a big part of what we do. We need to give people resources. We need to inform them about like what's going on and how it's impacting kids' health and make it really easy for them to take action. But the last thing I just want to say is that I do think when parents get fired up on issues like, and you can think of a range of issues like where parents have really taken leadership, there's really like no more powerful or more fierce advocates. Like if parents are like, my kids are being threatened, my kids are in harm's way, we have a really, I think we have that role, that emotional appeal and appeal to like, protecting kids that really needs more attention within the climate movement as a whole.
I definitely remember at school we had like an assembly, and it was about a woman who her son died from fentanyl overdose, and after as a result of that she like was driven to go to the Capitol, go to state Capitol, and advocate for new laws to
Mhm.
help reduce fentanyl overdose. So I definitely get what you mean about how parents can become great advocates, because I feel like parents really value their children, of course, right? And so I think if they see something bad happening, they're going to do something to make a change. So I definitely can see the value. Um, but I wanted to ask also, who do you think? I know you said your son pushed you really to join to move towards climate activism. But what was it, do you think, in your education and in your background that really made you interested at the beginning of climate? Because like what specifically drove you to climate? Because your kid could like having a child, definitely could motivate you. But what started like the initial spark of, oh, I want to do something in climate action?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will say I've always been, even though I was an English major, I've always been kind of interested in science and like history of science and how science influences culture. So that was already kind of like that kernel, that curiosity about science was there. But I will say for me, it was really so the 2018 IPCC report that said like there's this narrow window of time to act. We're this closing window of action. That was why I gravitated toward climate specifically. I'm like, okay, this is big. This is big. This is urgent. So that was really like the catalyst for me to get connected on this issue. But you're absolutely right, Max. There's so many social problems and social issues that we can get connected to. And I definitely want to have the message of like we don't have to do it all, right? I think it feels overwhelming, but also all these issues are connected to each other. So if you can find your path and find a place to really focus your skills and your attention, you can just trust that other people are going to work on those other issues and you don't have to lead on everything. So for me, climate, just because, it's so big, it's such an existential threat, it felt like, my top line priority as a parent.
So you mentioned that parents in your movement can be very passionate and can be effective for your movement. So what do you think your company is going to do in the future to involve more parents?
That's a great question. We're actually just we're piloting this fall. So we're doing something called, which I just recently learned about, human-centered systems design, which one of our board members is familiar with. So what we're going to do essentially is start listening to parents. Like we're going to find parents from really diverse backgrounds across Austin to interview, like to do these kind of 1 hour like in-depth interviews. And we're kind of coming out with the question of like, what are your obstacles? What are the challenges you face around getting connected? And there's some obvious ones, but there are some that we might just learn along the way. And then sort of through those interviews, really identify alongside those participants, like, well, what are some opportunities for you to take action? So this is the first time we're just like, rather than just trial and error, like just trying to see what works or doesn't work, we're actually going to talk to people and try to find out, what they think the challenges are so that we can kind of design strategies that really address some of those concerns. So I'm really excited about that because I think that that's going to help attract whole new audiences of parents to the work.
You talked a lot about like parents being involved and what you're going to do in the future to involve them. And PCC recently went to Washington for floods, I believed. How do you guys think how did you guys manage to start protests in front of the White House? I mean, that's pretty big for a company starting in Austin. And on top of that, you guys coordinated with the Healing Project. So how did that process look for PCC?
Sure. I will say that was a very kind of unique circumstance where we weren't organizing or planning. One of the cool things along the way is that I've gotten connected to parent climate organizations around the world through this group called Our Kids Climate. And one of the organizers I met is in New York City. And she told me about this DC protest. So this was a protest a protest and also a memorial to acknowledge the young people who died in the Texas Hill Country flooding, but also to demand, funding for the National Weather Service, for FEMA, for organizations that can kind of keep us safe in the future. So yeah, so it was really an organizer I knew in New York who invited us and the Healing Project to come out. And it was sort of, yeah, so it was other organizations that we collaborated with who made that happen. We got a lot of attention, a lot of press there. I think this is a really powerful, moving and tragedy. And I hope that it's going to lead to some really lasting, thoughtful change so we can protect people going forward.
Sounds like yeah, such a cool getting to go to the White House. I'm sure that definitely helped deal with like recruiting and things like that, and talking about that here locally. But I want to ask, so if say you start over again and you had just graduated from UT and today's world, because obviously I feel like the world of climate activism has changed a lot recently. What do you think would be the biggest obstacles for you if you had to start over again, and how do you think you'd go about creating this great sprawling network and project that you made?
Such a different world, first of all. Yeah, you're absolutely right there. I think there's just incredible opportunity right now, actually. I wouldn't say that there are a lot, I think that there's just so much going on and there's so much to be a part of. Um, but I do think that, yeah, the main takeaway is to get connected, right? Like to find like who are whatever it is that you're trying to get done, wherever you're trying to do it, like to sort of find out like who are the partners, who are the people who want to collaborate. How do you like develop those relationships? So, yeah, I think the more you can kind of be part of an ecosystem, right? Like, and not just be an individual, but that's going to make your organization stronger. And then like investing in those relationships, not just being like, oh, we'll see you after this one event, but really kind of revisiting them and growing them. I think that's how you can grow your organization. But Max, I don't know if this is your question, but I also do have some thoughts about like for folks who are based in Central Texas, like some great ways for young people to connect with environmental networking. Can I jump in with that?
Go ahead.
So one organization that folks should know about is, I hope they haven't changed, I think they might have changed their name, but they are maybe the artist formerly known as Emerging Green Leaders. They're this awesome network. They have virtual and in-person events. They connect people with a lot of like job fairs and like workforce opportunities. I think they're serving ages like 14 to 24 or thereabouts. So emerging green leaders is a really great way to just kind of, again, connect with others, learn about opportunities in the Austin area. And then I know I don't know where this is at, but Green Workforce Collaborative is another new resource to connect young people to environmental workforce opportunities. And the other one that's coming to mind is like Austin Civilian Conservation Corps in terms of like specifically helping young people connect with green jobs.
So I love how you've gone and mentioned a bunch of other organizations and of how everyone being interconnected and the network that we create being much more powerful than anything else that we could do individually, especially in regards to climate change, which is just such a big topic that none of us can really tackle it individually. So I was curious to know, do you have any role models or anyone that you look to as well for inspiration when you're trying to figure out how to confront climate activism and climate change as a whole?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. So I will say getting back to what I mentioned earlier, that I really find a lot of inspiration from youth activism in general. Like, there're just so many young people kind of stepping into leadership and challenging the status quo. I love following that. I love all the ways that young people have taken leadership, even like in lawsuits, and kind of putting themselves out there in these different ways. So that's like my general answer. One thinker who actually recently passed away over the summer is Joanna Macy. She's someone who has a background in like Buddhism, but also did a lot of work, in the climate, kind of foundational work on the climate movement. And she has, there's a recent podcast with her that I'm forgetting the name of, so I'll have to give it back to you with that for the show notes. But she has a really wonderful series of interviews kind of talking about what I love about her is that she really does a great job of like integrating the heart and the head. Like, yeah, we have solutions and we need to take action and we're rational creatures, but we also need to acknowledge some of the feelings that come up. And I think her work really acknowledges that there is emotion connected to what we're confronting, and if we can work through them, and if we work through them, then we're going to feel more empowered to take leadership. So Joanna Macy is definitely one to check out.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting perspective on sustainability and activism. And I know you've talked a lot about like what the parents have done. And so just, we're an organization of students. So we were wondering, is there anything that the youth can maybe do that you've learned through parents? Like how can we motivate our parents to engage in this kind of activism?
Oh, I love that question. By the way, the podcast is called We Are the Great Turning. So if you want to check it out. So the question is like, how do you get parents kind of going on this, and like what are ways that young people can talk to parents? Um, That's such an interesting question because I feel like I'm always thinking about it the other way. Like, how do you start a conversation with a young person in your life? But I think that I think the same advice is actually true when you're talking about your parents. I think starting with small conversations, kind of letting them in. So not like having like sitting them down and having the one big talk, like, I need you to, yeah, I need you to like take more to do more on climate. But just sharing little bits of what you're into, things you're learning about, things you're excited about, your frustrations, having those little but repeated conversations with them and letting them in, I think that's going to have an impact over time. That's going to, when they know this is something that you care about, they're going to start wanting to find ways to get a little more involved themselves. So that's my best advice is just to kind of, I mean, it's a good strategy for anyone in a family, right? Like communicate, communicate what you care about in small ways.
I know there's a lot of things that the everyday people could do, but if there was someone that who you think wanted to dedicate themselves to climate activism, would you give them any advice or any specific things that you think would lead them to success?
Yeah, I love that. So first off, I love this point that not everybody has to do that to make an impact. So I do want to start there, that we don't all have to become climate activists to address this problem, right? And so my advice for folks who don't necessarily want to like quit their day job and and go down this path is that there's still ways you can kind of look around and find opportunities, like in your workplace, in your school community, as you all have done. There are small things, there are ways that we're like part of these communities, whether it's a school, whether it's a neighborhood, whether it's a company, and looking around and seeing what you can do there is a great start. But if you want to dedicate yourself to this work, um, I feel like I'm going to repeat myself a little bit, but I do think a couple of things. I think finding your network and finding your people, like connecting to something bigger than you, connecting with other organizations, is really important, not just for having the most impact, but also just for feeling cared for, not feeling like alone or isolated with this work, because you can get burnt out doing this work. And so trying to find that like healthy network who can support you. Um, and I do think kind of connected to that, the advice is, you know, success involves also sometimes, looking at your emotions and your emotional responses to this work. Like don't push that aside. That's got good information. And that also has a place in the work you're doing. So again, also to not experience burnout, because this work really takes a lot out of you. Making space for your emotions, but also making space for fun and for like just downtime and for connecting with people, connecting with what matters to you. I think that's how you're gonna sustain yourself over the long term of a career.
Has your organization ever like faced a pushback or criticism from other people? And if so, like how do you respond to that? And what do you say to people that question the goal of like spreading climate awareness and climate activism?
Interesting. Well, actually, speaking of our presence at the Texas, at DC and in front of the White House, we definitely got a couple of some pushback there. My response was no response. I did not want to engage. I didn't need to engage with them. These weren't local people, offering like real criticisms. Um, I think that sometimes sometimes no response is the best response with that. I would say that like who we're trying to reach for the most part, and that really depends. I mean, some people are really trying to reach folks who you just like climate is a bad word or climate is a taboo word. But I think for us, we're trying to reach people who care about, like, who already know that climate change is real, that's an issue, but just don't know where to start or are busy with life and don't have time to get involved. So it's not that I want to like totally avoid those conversations, but I think we're really trying to serve people who are already kind of on board. And I don't necessarily need to go to the climate denier, corner to make an impact. But that's just my personal take. I think it's really awesome and it's valid and important for people to also be engaging folks with very different opinions on it. It's just not how not where I'm spending my energy.
So you do think it's important for some organizations to help confront like people that aren't fully or skeptical of like climate change and climate activism, but you're more focused on dealing with people who are and who want to like make an impact in their own community.
Yeah, that's right on, Tyler. But I do think, yeah, I mean, I do think there's a lot of validity and value in finding that common ground with people. It can sometimes feel really hard these days to find that common ground, but it's there. And actually, one thing that I feel like an advantage that we have in the sense that we're focusing on protecting kids, protecting the next generation, that seems like that should be a shared value, right? Like that most people have that in common. So I will say that, I think there's a lot of value in finding the things we have in common and starting there with conversations, as well as, not necessarily having to use the word climate in a conversation. Like you can have other language that you use that can start a dialogue. Thanks. That's a great question, though.
Thank you so much for the advice that you're giving us, especially, this is so useful for people our age trying to create an impact on a larger scale. But I was wondering, how do you think the current like political situation and the national attitude towards climate change is going to impact future leaders who are attempting to make this change?
I'm not going to deny that things are a little hard right now on the national level, on the federal level. There were some really great, and I'm part of this work group like of volunteers trying to get people to take advantage of like federal tax credits through the Inflation Reduction Act to like energize their homes before they expire. And the idea that something that had like another 8 years to help people and help the clean energy transition is now ending at the end of this year is a big bummer. But I do think that the story is more complicated, like even on a national level. I think if you look at, how many Americans across the political spectrum, believe that climate change is real, understand that climate change is fueling extreme weather events, and also are supportive of solar, by the way, and the clean energy transition. There's like support across the political spectrum. So I actually think that despite um, some hard setbacks, right, for us, that actually the national conversation is has still has the potential, has the seeds for a lot of good change and forward movement. And then also, I just want to say, like, for us, like, we tend to focus on the local level, like, we focus on advocacy in Austin. And we do that because right now it feels like cities, and also communities, including school communities, like, that's where we can really move things forward. That's where we can move the dial. So that's kind of also a strategy. It's like, okay, things aren't great at the federal level, but what can we do locally to make sure that that change is still happening?
On a more specific note, if you could right now talk to a policymaker or a representative, or even if you were a policymaker yourself, is there any specific changes or anything you'd want to tell these policymakers to try to maybe change or try to implement for the sake of climate change?
Yeah, well, I definitely started with like keep the Inflation Reduction Act. Like, why did you get rid of that? Don't make that go away. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I will say, like, I'm not like a policy nerd, or that's not like where I'm coming from. But I think that a lot of work, I mean, Project Drawdown, right, is a great example. There's all this incredible research that's already there, that's out there. There's already plans out there for how to drive things forward. I think what I would want to say to policymakers is more about, you know, why aren't you investing in our kids' future? Why aren't you investing in our kids' health? What could be more important than that? Um, and a clean energy transition is really the way forward for doing all those things and also making energy more affordable. So there's just so many great financial arguments, but at the end of the day, like, what is all of this for if we're not going to be safeguarding our kids' health and safeguarding the next generation?
Okay, I know we've talked about a lot of stuff and you're on quite a tight schedule, so I kind of want to end us off with a concluding question. So earlier when you talked about Joanna Macy's kind of like perspective on climate change and the climate change crisis, it made me wonder, what is your like biggest takeaway from working in this area of activism? Or I guess like what mindset have you developed around sustainability?
That's a great question, Audrey. So a couple things. One thing I realized, which I know I've said before, is that we're stronger together. I think too often the sustainability conversations are about like individual choices and lifestyle choices, and I don't want to diss those. Like, of course, all of us are gonna make those changes at that level. But the thing that I've taken away the most from this work is that um, coming together for bigger change, for system level change, like that's how I want to use my time. And I think that's why it's important is not because it just has a bigger impact, but because it ties us to other people, right? Like it ties us to community. Where right now, some people just like don't know who their neighbors are, right? Like we're missing those opportunities to like be connected, and also across generations, right? Like let's have these conversations. Let's share our perspectives and our knowledge. So yeah, I think that one key takeaway is just like the value of community, and how on the path toward addressing what's a huge challenge for humanity, like we can actually make things better. We can be happier. We can be more connected. So yeah, that's my big takeaway from this work. And the other thing I will say, I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed. They feel like, well, there's just so much to do, and that leads to like despair or turning off or turning away from the issue. But the thing to remember is that the future is uncertain. It's unwritten. And I think we sometimes like we want to know for certain that like what we're going to do is going to work or have an impact. But I think the fact that things are uncertain is also makes them hopeful, right? That's what gives me hope is that, we really don't know until we start taking actions, until we try the kind of change we can make. So I would also just say like dwell in uncertainty, like embrace uncertainty because some good things can come from that.
Well, thank you so much, Eileen. I think we got a lot of great insights about, how it would be for you to go into the space and, how it's going to be going forward. So we just want to thank you so much for interviewing with us today. I hope you enjoyed the experience.
Oh my gosh, it
Um,
was so lovely to meet you all, and y'all had like the best questions. So this was a lot of fun to hang out, and hope we can do it again soon.
yes, definitely. Well, thank you so much.
Take care, y'all.